I hope you enjoyed your breakfast. Dave is very kindly recording this testimony of Ali's, and he's left some flyers around, so if you would like to buy one, then be in touch with Dave. Yeah, exactly. Before we start, I'd like to pray to you, is that right? Yes, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your faithful servant, your beautiful daughter Ali. Thank you for all the work she's done with our youth and the many lives she's touched of us here today. We thank you for your inspiration and her love of you, Lord. And thank you for this testimony she's going to give and for us to be here to hear it. Amen. Amen. Amen.
I think we should end there, really. I'll wander about a little bit. I told Dave that. And I'll sit down a little bit, because I like it to be informal, if that's okay. As formal as this looks right now. It's nice. It's only for you guys. It's nice to see some of my younger friends here. I'm very happy speaking to teenagers, so if you could all revert to being a teenager.
Who's got the gum?
Chew gum, get your phone out. Actually, your phones will all have to go in a basket at the door. Yeah, go on. You'd be sitting on the floor with a beanbag, actually. I don't know if I could do that anymore. But... Anyway, thank you for inviting me to come. I mean, it was quite funny when Diana approached me. Because a lot of people have been approaching me to wish me well because my dad had died. And it was fabulous. She said, I'm sorry about your dad. And by the way, could you speak at the later time? And I said, I haven't buried him yet. But I knew Dad would think that was great. And in a way, when I thought about that, I thought, no, that's the right thing to do. If you know that's the person to go and ask, encouraged by your friends to do it, then it's a privilege to be here and to chat. I'm used to talking about other things, but we've all got a story about how God has worked in our life. And just to make you nervous, I think I get the right to choose the next person from here who's going to say their story.
Oh, I like it.
That'd be good.
Roulette.
Yeah.
Just because you've done yours.
I mean, someone said to me, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "Well, I am, but I bet there's people there, here, who are us thinking, thank goodness it's her doing it and not me." So, if that's you, then God may have some calling on your life this morning, the next time. But it's great to be able to talk sometimes about ourselves and indulge in that. And God's got a story over my life. And I'm going to share it with you. I'm now in my 50s, so we've got 5 sections really. We'll start from my early years, and I'll work my way through. My testimony about how God actually moved me from, as it were, from death to life. I teach young people, and have done, to say it in 3 minutes. Because in life in general, you don't get much more chance of people's attention just to talk about your story. And so I could just do a 3-minute thing and then we could all go away. But our testimony is more than just our conversion, isn't it? And especially when you get older, you see how God has been moving in stuff that even wasn't going right in our early days, becomes right. When you've got that overarching understanding that God has got a bigger picture. It's fabulous to talk today after hearing Karen share her Lent testimony and Priscilla. How many of you actually were able to get to hear Priscilla? Yeah, lots of us. And Karen's and Priscilla's links in mine. Priscilla's because she talks about us being a dot. A dot in time. And I just wanted to reiterate that because all my story is really just a small, tiny dot in God's plan. But it's an important dot. And I think that's for all of us. We are precious, important dots. Albeit that's what we are. Sometimes getting that balance is quite healthy. So this is my talk. It's only, it wasn't even written down until I was told I was being videoed. My sister told me I ought to put some makeup on. Sarah said I ought to it down. So, there we go. I put some lipstick on and so here it is. So I was privileged to be born into a Christian home, and it is a privilege to be born into a home where mum and dad love the Lord. Now that's going to be the same for some of you, not the same for others, but for me that's where I was born. I am the second child of 4. My sister was 9, and then I was born. I've got a younger sister 4 years younger than me, and then a brother 13 years younger than me. So I've been a middle child, and actually Daniel was born after Val got married. So I've also really been an older child as well. It's been quite interesting. So if you're middle children and you've got, you know what a middle child's like, that's me. And then I've got a little bit of older child in me as well. Oh, fabulous. Hello, Marjorie. No, please do. We've got a chair right here for you. I wonder why this was, I wonder why this was empty. And now we know. So come and join us.
That's the way for the district house.
You don't mind if I don't start again?
As long as I hear everything you're saying.
She's only just started when she was born, Marjorie.
There's a pressure now to make sure I speak up.
Yes.
I'll do my
Project
best.
your voice.
I will project my
Don't
voice.
speak too quickly.
Don't worry, I'm No, come and sit down, I love it. Somehow I can hear my father speaking. So that was my privilege of being born in a Christian family, and that's where I fitted in. And Mum was the mum that did all the caring and the supporting, and Dad was the guy that went to work and played sport at the weekend and loved us in that way, bless him. And a lot of you know Dad. So that was my early years, going to church, going to Crusaders Sunday afternoon. And for me, if I could go to church in the evening, I was happy to go, and it was quite exciting. I had a cousin who was deaf, and I learnt to lip read with him, so we used to lip read away during the service and chat. It was great because no one could hear us, but it was just quite exciting. But also it's quite interesting listening again to Priscilla and Karen. Sometimes when you're brought up in a Christian home when you're young, Sundays can be boring days. And that's a bit of a, I mean, I'd love to have some questions afterwards and a bit of discussion, but that's an interesting topic, I think, is how we bring up our children in a Christian home and their relationship to Sunday and what we do and what we don't do. And I don't remember it as being a particularly boring day, but I do remember not being able to do things. We didn't have a telly for a long time, but then I do remember we weren't allowed to watch our telly on a Sunday, and we didn't go out. There's a lovely story that my dad used to tell when we used to go out for a walk on a Sunday afternoon, is what you did. And we walked past the sweetie shop at Grove Park, and evidently I said, Daddy, could I have some sweeties please? And he gave that great response, no, Annie, I'm sorry, we don't have to buy sweeties on a Sunday because we're Christians. And of course I responded, well, I'm not a Christian. Get in! But I don't think he still bought me them, but we have to be wary of what we teach our children and what we say, because they've often got a little answer for us, haven't they? But I have to say that if I leap forward, Sundays did change, and God changed a bit in our family, and it became a bit more relaxed and a bit more spirit-led and less rule-led. Karen's from a Brethren background, which is pretty strict. We were from a Baptist background, so quite strict as a Brethren, but there were still these rules. Can you relate to that, about what you weren't allowed to do on Sundays? Yeah, it's interesting. But anyway, I got up through my teenage years, very happy in general to go to church, and one of the things that was very, very important to me in my teenage years was my youth group. And it's interesting how that comes back to me later in my story, but my youth group was a friendship group. My parents, we moved churches a bit, but my parents followed me back to a Baptist church where there was a good youth group. We had a Friday night club, which I loved and went to. That's where I first went to Westwatch, was because we were taken there as 13 13, 14-year-olds. And that was my friendship group. I'm a great believer, still am, that our children need children around in a safe Christian family. And I don't think you can do, much more for your teenagers than surround them with good Christian friends. And if that means you go searching for where that's happening, I think that's certainly what I now will be doing for my little boys, and we'll come to that. But it's what my parents did, let me go, move out of the church, that they were in a small mission church, nothing for teenagers. And they followed me, and it was great. I had a great school life, met Sarah when we were at school. We were friends, but she was in a slightly different friendship group to me, and I always looked up to her for some reason. She was popular and sporty and all of those things, and I played sports, so that's how we really got to know each other, because we were in the same teams. I've told her she can get her own back if she gives her testimony one day, but we'll wait and see. So that was my upbringing, but I hit 16, and I think quite healthily really started to feel that this Christian life I'd been given and encouraged by my family seemed at 16 to have quite a few do's and don'ts in it. And I think that's quite a natural thing of being 16, 15, sometimes it's earlier. But you start questioning what's going on and why you can't. Why can't I do this? And why can't I smoke? And why can't I get drunk? And why can't I? And again, I think that's quite a challenge for us as parents and aunties and grandparents, is how we portray our faith to our teenagers. And I took the decision and told my parents I'm going to live without God for a bit. Became a little bit rebellious at school, wanted a revolution, and all of that, compare the strictness of the teachers, and had a little bit of fight in me really, and said to Mum and Dad, I don't understand this faith, so I'm going to live without it for a while. And, bless them, they must have had a little minor battle inside, but they let me, and it didn't really mean very much. It meant I didn't go to church, I didn't go to any youth group anymore, and I didn't do anything terribly bad, but I felt free. I felt free of what was placed on me as a young person. But within a year, I wasn't happy. And it was quite interesting, and all the time you think, yeah, God's got his hand on your life. Because actually, from thinking I would have a better life, I actually became more and more miserable. And that sort of teenage thing of what is the point? What are we here for? I'm only going to live and then die, and then that's it, the dot. The dot, what is it all about? So my freedom didn't feed me very much at all. So I can remember I'd worked at Home Bay Court one summer. That's where I'd met Karen's sister. And Home Bay Court had been good for me because it was a Christian environment. But I still was in that part of my life where I was thinking, it's not really for me. But a couple, young, and they probably were young, I thought they were old, but they probably were in their 30s, took an interest in me and befriended me. And this is another thing that I think is very influential in life. If you can show some interest in a teenager and draw them into your family, however you do that, maybe nowadays it's even more tricky, but I knew this couple were interested in me and cared for me. And so when I worked at Home Bay, I used to get invited to their house for a meal, and when you're 16, 17, that's a big thing, to be invited by someone who isn't your parents, and invited to go for dinner. It's very grown up as well, and it feels great. And this couple, I think they loved me really. And one day, I can't really remember why now, but the husband had come to stay at my parents' home. I think he was speaking in London. And in the evening, I was 17, and in the evening we went to my sister and her husband's for dinner. And I can remember them talking about celebrities who were Christians. And I can remember thinking, I'm embarrassed about my faith. It's all about what I can't do, but these celebrities are proud of it, and sure of it. And I thought, that's what I want. I need to be sure that this faith that I've been brought up in is mine. And so as we drove home that night, I just said to this guy, I would like to know that my faith is sure. And bless Eddie, he said, do you want to know it right now? And I said, yeah, I would. So he pulled the car, turned left, pulled up, outside Bromley, what was Bromley Hospital. And he said, well, we're going to make sure right now. And he prayed, he said, I'm going to pray a prayer, you pray it after me, and then it's done. It's as easy as that, and so that's what we did. He pulled the car up, we prayed, he prayed, amen, amen. He said, right, now you know it. And you know what, I've never doubted it from that moment. He wrote in this Bible, that's why I'm holding it really, he wrote the testimony there for me. And it was quite interesting because that was outside Bromley Hospital, and he sort of moved the car to go back home. And I said, oh, Eddie, we need to go right, not left. So we turned around the car in a street that had been mine and Sarah's school. I'd only left it in the July, and this was the October, 6th of October. And there had been what we called a tuck shop, but it was newsagents in Newbury Road. And it's where I spent many of my pocket monies and things. And 6 years I'd passed this school twice a day, this shop twice a day. But on this occasion, when he turned the car round, there was a poster outside that just said, from death to life. And he's written here, confirmation received by reading the first poster outside a local newsagent shop, which read, from death unto life. And that was my move. And it is as easy as that. And I've never ever doubted my faith and my being precious to God from that moment. Now that doesn't mean my life hasn't had its ups and downs since then, but I haven't perhaps wandered a bit from God, but I've always known Him and always had that assurance. So that speaks to me when I look back about the confidence of that man that said, do you want to know it right now? Let's just do it. And it was simple. It's just a prayer that says, you know, I'm yours and forgive me. And into life I stepped at the age of 17, a good age to become a Christian really, because I had a lot of my life ahead, and I've been able to walk that journey with God. So that was me at 17. I can remember Mum at the time was thrilled, but said, you need a job. Because I'd gone to do teaching, and I thought I was going to be a PE teacher, but I hadn't wanted to do the A-levels, and I'd stepped out of college. And so she said, right, it's great that you've become a Christian, but we've got to find you a job. So I started working in a bank. I did 6 years working in a bank. That's where I met Sandra and Glenn, and they were great years for me. And I went on with God. You know, when you look back at old Bibles, I used to write reams in my Bible about all the little things that had gone on, and tiny, really writing about just great times with God.
What's it now?
They can't read it now. I need a magnifying glass. And my friend, in fact, Karen's sister used to send me little stickers with things on, and they're all, it's very precious to look back on this Bible, which, you know, I moved away from this version because it's the old RSV, but that's where I started, and I'm sure many of you have got, you know, books like that. And hopefully they'll be passed down the generations, you know, for the next generation to see. We've got Dad's Bible, and that's precious, and I've got my Mum's Bible, and things underlined in it, and there's my old black leather Bible. But yeah, I worked in the bank. Sarah and I moved, well, we went to a kibbutz, didn't we, Sarah? I worked in the bank for 6 years, but the bank back then was a little bit male orientated. And if you were a woman in the bank, you definitely had to do your banking exams if you wanted any sort of, nodding heads, any sort of progress really. And yet the men didn't. A guy I started with, he was being pushed up through the bank. And I can remember thinking, is this the life, my working life that I want? Or is there something else that God has got for me, and that is a bit more exciting maybe than working in a bank. So I decided to go and live on a kibbutz for a little while. I was at St Augustine's at Bromley Common by then, and a girl there had gone on a kibbutz and had a wonderful time. And I can remember saying to Sarah, we used to play netball together then, and I was going, and she said, great, I'll come with you. And so we both went. I took a break from my work, we went to Israel, and that's another little story about Sarah's conversion, because she wasn't a Christian when we went to Israel, but by the time we came back she was. And so that's a
thanks, Al.
That's her testimony. She went from down. She's so nervous. She went from England to Israel, became a Christian from death to life, and that was great. So that was an influential time. And so we moved into our 20s. We came back when we were 24. And decided that we were going to share a home together. We could rent, we could be grown up and move out of house, and that's what we did. That's when Karen and Brian in their 20s, they got married and came and lived with us for a while, and then we were able to help them with find their first flat, and we were really close. It's been a friendship that's gone through all the years, and to think we're now as old as we are, and back then we were just young really, but it was great friendships. And a good time. And my 20s were, there were boyfriends in my 20s. They were fine, but nothing earth-shatteringly worth changing my life for at that time. I was having far too much of a good time, really, in life. I used to help in youth group at the local church. We were, as I said, at St Augustine's, and I just loved my 20s, really. But then, bang. At 29, interestingly, we went on holiday with Karen and Brian and Glenn and Sandra, and part of that holiday was about bringing Glenn and Sandra and Karen and Brian together, because we've got this lovely young couple. We were a little bit older than them, and we thought it would be really good to introduce Karen and Brian to another lovely young couple. So Sarah and I were like the link between Karen. We'd only met a few times before we went on holiday.
We'd only met them once.
Well, they'd only met them once before we went on holiday. We had this idea, let's take them away on holiday together. They agreed. And on the morning of going on holiday to Yugoslavia, I went to give the keys to my mum. And as I knocked on the door, she'd opened the door, but she didn't look right. And she said she didn't feel well. And I can remember thinking, oh my golly, I'm going on holiday. And she said she thought it was, she had pain in her chest. So fair enough. But she said, your dad's out having a walk, and he's going to take me to hospital when he gets back. She knew what my dad was like. I needed to let him just get that walk out of his system. And sometimes us women, we're too nice, aren't we? We wait until, and she waited, bless her, until he came back. And I can remember saying to her, Mum, you may just need to be a grandma now, because she was a grandma, rather than the busy mum that you are. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. She was fabulous, busy lady, a lot of people would come to her. She was running a youth group at the church and helping out with new Muslims. She was fabulous. So it was odd to see her not well, but we were due on a plane. So I can remember going and giving my keys to my brother-in-law and saying, just give me a ring, but Mum's obviously not right. I got to the airport and we ran from the airport, and the message was that she was in hospital and they were going to keep her in hospital for a little while. Fine. We rang, I think, when we were in Yugoslavia. She was in intensive care. And I can think, oh no, I've come skiing. But I knew I needed to be in Yugoslavia because we were linking these two sets of friends together, and it was right to be there. But then I got the message that Mum was back out on a ward and she was doing fine, and I'd said, shall I come home, shall I come home? No, it's okay. Mum's looking forward to seeing you on Sunday when you're back. She's out of intensive care, so all is going fabulously. Well, as you can imagine, it didn't all go fabulously because she had a massive heart attack on the Friday morning. We got a telegram. I was a bit fed up with skiing by then. I think something else was on my mind. I was well fed up with skiing by then. And so Friday we decided not to go skiing on that day and just take a day off. And I can remember Sarah coming up the stairs saying, what was she, wasn't it? I've got a telegram for you, a telegram. Now I thought a telegram was good news, because at a wedding, when people got married in those days, you'd read the telegram and it was like, congratulations, it's great. So I wasn't worried at all. I think Sarah was. I said no. Yeah, she said no, not, you know, and I opened it up and it said, Mummy, not at all well, Ali, please come home. And so I rang my sister's home, no answer. I rang my mum's home, no answer. I rang my other sister's home. And my brother-in-law answered and said, Ali, they're all at the hospital and your mum's fighting for her life. She's 59. So I said, right, okay, I'll come home. You know, we started to sort that out. I didn't even have a credit card in those days. So luckily, Glenn, who worked for the bank, actually had a credit card to be able to buy the tickets for us to get home. But then the phone rang. And I answered the phone, and it was my sister saying, Ali, are you coming home? And she had that sort of voice on. And I said, yes, yes. And then I went, Mum's died, hasn't she? And she said, yes, she's died. And so we did fly home, and but Mum had died at the age of 59. And I'm now 56. And I did think 59 was quite old, obviously, back then, but I also realised 59 is no age at all. And so Mum therefore left. I was 29, my brother was 16, my sister was pregnant with her first baby, and my other sister had 3 small children under 8. So we had a new phase of family life to approach. But I never doubted God. I never got angry with God. My mum was such a Christian lady that the last thing that she would have wanted was for any of us to really get cross with God and let blame him for it. I was really helped by a guy that spoke at the funeral, who said that if God had been looking down at St Augustine's, at all the people sitting there, and said, who is ready to come and be with me? Who is ready? He would have gone, Jesus, she's ready to come and be with me. And that's always helped me to see it from his point of view, and in a way from my mum's, who, you know, bless her, she would not have wanted to miss Daniel growing up and all the grandchildren, but on the other hand, she was having a heavenly party that she was ready for. It's just us that are left behind, that are not ready, and that have to journey with it and work it all out. So that was, I was 30 about 22 days later. So interestingly, February, March is an interesting time of year for me. But we did march forward, and my 30s were still good years, but I was angry. I was an angry girl for a lot of questions as to, you know, that it might have been okay for Mum, but it wasn't okay for so many of the rest of us. And I think, looking back, I had other boyfriends in my 30s, and but my security was in God, but it was also my relationship with Sarah. And I know now, looking back, that I didn't want anything. I didn't need anything else to rock me. I didn't need to risk anything else in those years of being 30. But I was desperate to have my own children. So I had a bit of a dilemma, because I wanted that security, but I didn't really want to risk new relationships. You know, they're horrible, aren't they, new relationships? I mean, unless you really fall madly in love and it's all perfect. Even after you do that, girls, you think, what have I done? You know, that's what I kept thinking. Oh no, not another one. And all the time I thought I was having such fun with Cameron Bryan and Glenn and Sandra and Sarah and my friends. You know, I decided to stick with that, really. I changed jobs virtually every 10 years. It's quite interesting. As I turned 20 and 30, I changed jobs, and I think that was another thing to do with Mummy dying. I decided I needed a fresh job, and I took a new job in my 30s. But God was with me all the time of my journeying, and I never worried about being cross and angry. I didn't feel that I was upsetting God, because He knew me. He made me. He was walking with me In fact, he knew it before I knew it, didn't he? So, again, my relationship with him was very steady. But it's just dealing with these things that life brings us. It's hard. And there's no two ways about it. That's really what it is. But he was gracious to me because Mum died in the March. And as I said, Mary was pregnant. So little Thomas was born in the July. And new life, when you've lost someone, new life is a thing. And this little baby comes along, doesn't know anything about all these sad people that are around, and just needs you to be fun, and needs you to be, to love them. And so that's what I did. And this baby was a healing for me, really. And then 3 years later, she had another child. And you had your first, I think, then, didn't you, as well, Karen? And so these children were a blessing. And I was struggling with whether I was going to have my own. And you always do a little bit of, what if I could have my children outside of marriage? I wonder if I could have some sperm donor. And I wonder if I should foster. I wonder, what is the right thing? But I think deep down I knew that if I wasn't going to be married, then I needed to give that to God and say, okay, I won't have my own children. As hard as that is to do. So these little bubbers were great fun. And again, another lesson I've learned in life is that, bless my sister, she blessed me with those children because she said, here they are. And very regularly gave me them. And off she went.
Every time the clocks went back.
Every time the clocks went back. Yeah, her husband's birthday's in October. It was, there you go. But regularly we'd have these children, and they were a joy. But she thinks I blessed her. She would say that her marriage has been blessed by the fact that her and her husband could have time together without the children, to invest in their relationship and just to have some space to think. And I think, isn't God good? Because she blessed me, but she thinks I blessed her. Fabulous. And that's the way I think God works. And it's wonderful to be able to do that for each other without really, in some respects, even realising it. So children have featured, and obviously you're going to know where we're going with this, because children have featured quite a lot in my life.
I've had 30 minutes,
I've had 30, that's fine. I'm already 30. So that's fine. But when I came to being nearly 40, and I'd worked 10 years as a housing manager. We'd had these lovely children involved in our life and all of that. And again, I felt God was calling me to something different, something new. More than that, I think He was calling me out of what I was doing, actually. But I wasn't sure what it was into. It would be lovely sometimes to know what it's into, but I knew He was calling me out of it. He was calling me out of my work and also away from my friends for a bit, my family. And for me that was quite important. So I spent 6 months working on a wonderful Greek island for Masterson, a Christian holiday company. But that, I think I was at this church by then. Yeah, I was at this church by then. And God called me out. So I knew that I'd got a little bit, confused, I think, about my future and my present at that point. Partly by talking to too many people. And I think sometimes we chat with those we love about what we're doing in life. And actually, we just really need to get alone with God and find out and fight for what it is you want us to do and where do you want to take us. And it was a bit for me, all right, well, that's why I need space in my head. I need it to be difficult for me for a bit in order to find God again for me and just me and Him. And as much as I think it's important that family and friends influence us, we've got to be careful about what we say to people and the advice we give, because it can take us down a route that may be not the same as actually what God putting it, especially if it's really what we want to hear. And one of the things I was struggling with was, should I go into the ministry? Is that what God's calling me to? I am single. It looks like I'm going to be single. What's the future for Sarah and I? Because we were Actually, by then we'd got our own homes, hadn't we, I think. But what is God calling me to? I'm actually free and single, and I could do anything. And that in itself was a little bit scary. I was a bit envious of people that had a husband and had children and were a bit rooted. So I went to this Greek island, and as things would happen, people chatted away at this church about the fact that I was away there and looking at what my future was. And before I know it, I get a call from Bimby about would I like to come back and work here. And it was really a bit of a bolt out of the blue, because I hadn't thought about doing youth work at all. And it was interesting, because I thought the ministry might be my calling. But I thought, well, we'll start with youth work. If that's what is needed here, and I am free, I'll do it for a year. I'll do it for a year. I love setting things up. I can just set things up and then let someone else take them. But that's again where God's got. Actually, you were something to do with it, I think, weren't you, my friend? Yeah, with that. Yeah, praise God, that's great. So people that influence your life. We were in a home group at the time together, and I think they'd had some chats about, we've got a resource in Ali and a gap at the church. Let's bring those two things together. And I started youth work here, happy to set it up. But the moment I started working with the young people, I fell in love with them and with the job and the passion for those young people. And that's actually never gone. And it's quite interesting that I had to step into that role and start doing it, and then the passion came. And quite often we think, what is my passion? God's going to call me into my passion. And I don't think that often is the case. I think God wants to know, are you going to step in with me? And then I will equip you and fill you and give you fun. And that's what I want, that's what I needed at 40. And there's nothing for me that was more fun than growing a youth group. I think we had 7 young people at the first club night we started. You see, I started a club night. So when you look back, what was important for me in my youth was my Friday night club night, because it rooted me in a church and it rooted me in a youth group. And I just knew that's what was needed here. And so we had such fun. And that youth group grew and grew and grew and grew. And people came, young people came, and young people brought their family, and the family started coming. And again, it's that investment in our young people is so, so important. And that was my 40s. And I can remember Pippa, bless her. Pippa said, when I said to her, I did want children. You don't need children now, Annie, look at us all. You've got all of us. And I can remember thinking, yes, Pippa, you're right, actually. You've given me such a privilege. I've got hundreds of young people. And it is like your flock. It is like your children. And that's great. And God gave me. One of the verses that was given to me when I first became a Christian was Psalm 37 verse 4. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. In verse 5, commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. Now, I didn't think he'd given me the desire of my heart, because I wanted my own children. But God does do stuff with us, and change us a bit, and also says, actually, you don't get everything you want, Annie. What I want for you is to want me, and then we'll journey together. And some of that's painful. I wanted my mum, and if I was honest, I still would like her. But that wasn't my journey. That wasn't my calling. But God gave me such good things. So we head towards 50, and I've always looked after children all the way through my years working at the church. My brother had a little girl that I was needed to look after. Sarah's niece had 2 little boys and then fell pregnant with twin boys. So I looked after them once a week all through the time I was doing the youth work. So I was really blessed with the teenagers and with some small ones. But then my own brother, after a marriage fail, meets another girl, and before I know it, he's had a baby. And I thought, wow, I never thought heading towards in my 50s, we'd have more small babies. But I was needed to look after Jacob, and many of you here know Jacob. And again, while I was doing the youth work, I looked after him. But within 9 months of him being born, there was another one on their way. And immediately they told me that they were having a second. I knew that I was to lay down my role at the church and be a stay-at-home mum for a bit. And again, not really realising that here is the delight of my heart. You know, he's given me a chance to spend time with Bobbies at home. And so Jacob was 22 months and Samuel was 6 weeks, I think, when I started that role. And I do miss the young people. I think there's something very precious and special about teenagers, and I don't think my time probably with them is over. But it's taken a break. And I've been called into the family that I'm now with. And many of you are a blessing on those little boys that I now look after, nearly 24/7. And again, I thought I was called to look after the boys, but God knows, doesn't He, what He's up to. And I've actually been called in to another family, and it's bigger than the boys. And Sarah, bless her, has been called in to that family. We always knew when we bought the house that we've now got that we were buying a 3-bedroomed house for a reason, but we weren't sure what that was. Now, we had youth group there for many, many years, and we realised we needed it for all the young people that were coming through the house. But actually, again, you need it because you're going to have a family in that house, and that's exactly what we've got now. Is my sister-in-law is precious because she knows that she needs to share the mummy role. And Samuel calls me Mummy Ali. That's how he sees me. And you know, him and Jacob know they've got sort of 2 mummies. Now they're very clear who Mummy is, but they're actually very clear that Ali is an important part of their life. And Sarah and I had lots of plans really by 55 that we might live half the year in Cos, that we would be doing various sorts of things. But again, God just changed our hearts with these 2 boys and have said, you guys need to be family for a bit. And that's where I am right now. I have the delight of my heart, which is to be a bit of a mummy with these 2 boys. And Mary shared her children with me really well, but she never left me with them and went to work and said, right, there you go, 24/7. And that was obviously preparation for what I've now been doing. As many of you know, Jacob has a chromosome deletion. Well, in fact, both boys have a chromosome deletion, and he's got his challenges in life. And again, I think I'm just 56 now, actually. I keep calling myself 55, but it's a bit easier to deal with children in some respects in your 50s because you have less anxiety over some strange things. It's right, isn't it? Because, you know, I've journeyed with Karen and her lovely 2 children, and and Sandra and various other mums, and you're stressed a bit with your children. You have them at quite a young age, don't you? And it's quite stressful. But when you're able to stand slightly aside and speak into a family and support family, you are a bit, I mean, you know, people at toddler group, you say, do you not worry about that? No, don't worry about that. You know, I mean, it might even be a dirty t-shirt, or they haven't slept very long, or they're spitting out their food, or they don't want to eat that. No, I'm not worried. You know, things that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm responsible for ensuring these boys grow up well and healthy. But I think God knows that actually what the family need right now is a bit of balance and a bit less stress. And He also knows that's what I need. And so I was able to step out of my working life and just step into having a bit more fun. And that's what I'm doing right now. And the interesting thing is that it's not about to change again. It's slightly going to shift because both boys in September will be at school. And so I wonder what God has got for me next. And the thing is, I know it's something. I know it will be with the children involved in it, because you can't step into their lives and then suddenly step out. But I know that I'm being prepared for something next. And I don't know whether standing here and talking to you is part of that, but we'll just wait and see what God's got for me next. But I hope by seeing where I've been and where I've journeyed and where I've come, you can see that it actually goes round in circles a bit. You know, stuff that I was doing back there, it makes sense now why I'm doing what I'm doing here, and you know, I can encourage now parents of teenagers, and now I can encourage grandparents. It's such a role. When I was youth worker here, I was so moved by grandparents that brought their children to church. And my brother and sister-in-law don't come to church, but I can bring those boys to church. It sometimes skips a generation and then comes back, and it's an important role that we have. I mean, many of you know our grandchildren are ours to pray for. I mean, bless my dad and Jan, you know, that dad prayed for us all the time. It was a great prayer. And if there's anything he used to say that he couldn't do so much, but I would always pray for you. And all through my work in life, and especially when I was here, and then especially with the boys, Dad prayed for us. And if anything, now he has passed away, I've lost a prayer over my life. And I have become, I don't have any parents now, except for, bless Joan. So you better stay
Keep
away
taking the
for a
tablets,
minute.
Joan.
Keep taking the tablets. But I'm now the older generation. You know, it's quite odd when your mum and dad have gone. I need to step now. Although I haven't changed much, but I feel I have to step in to that role of parent and father. And it's good, it's timely. I read a book a while ago, which I shared in the Lent course a few years ago, which was called The Return of the Prodigal Son. And if I was to ask you what character, and I'm going to ask you, what characters in the story of the Prodigal Son do you relate to? Anyone? None of them. Fine.
I think sometimes I feel like both sons.
Right, okay, both sons. Anyone else felt like both sons? Anyone relate to the one that went off? Yeah? And anyone relate to the one that stayed? Yeah, you know, I mean, I think it's a fascinating story. But what this book did for me, it drew me through the one that went, it drew me through the son that stayed, and it drew me onto the father that was at home waiting for his son to return, and his father that was with his son. And the challenge of that book is about becoming the father or the mother. And maturing really into the father role. And I suppose for now that's really come back to me because my own dad is now in glory. And I need to step up and be that father role, that mother role for the next generation. And that, I think, is what God is calling us all to forget our own, forget ourselves really, and to be the one that does the blessing, that reaches out and blesses. And that is a maturity that spiritually we need to get to and journey towards. And I'm not there yet, by a long way. But I know that's the call on me. And I put that out as a call on all of us really, to move into that role of the blessing of the Father. So that's my journey. That's a proper history. It's had its ups and downs, and it's had its really good things. It's always had God. The verse that I was given when I was 17 was this one. If you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For man believes with his heart, and so is justified, and he confesses with his lips, and so is saved. The scripture says, no one who believes in him will be put to shame. Amen.
That was wonderful.
or comments? Oh, let's try and get a question for you. Yeah, you see, there you go.
Ali, I first came through St Paul's about 14 years ago, and I relate back to my first day coming through the door. I was looking for a church when we first moved in. In fact, I'm out of parish by most denominations, and coming here. And I walked in with Steph, and Steffi was 11 at the time. And Pam Farr was at the door to meet and greet me. You dived down the church and grabbed hold of Steph and said, "You're coming to push." Well, I didn't come to church, I didn't know what it was at the time. But I didn't realise until recently what a significant person you were in Stephen's life. Not through the good, through the troubles. And as you know, she was at uni for 5 years. And we'd had our problems, we had our ups and downs. But she was still in communication with you. So you were still a part of that. I was worried because she'd moved out of faith. I thought she'd moved out of faith, must pray myself. And it wasn't until the beginning of Lent, and she just said something to me at home in the kitchen. She said, I said something, and she said, "No, Mummy, I'm giving her some. It's Lent." I went, "Pardon?" She said, "It's Lent." I said, "No, every year we do something." When you're home, you only come to church at Easter and Christmas. I didn't realise that you're still thinking you're still there. It's you. Well, it helped to place that in her that I wasn't able to reach out and do. And I do thank you for that. I really do thank you. She said yesterday, "I'm going to be 25 in October, quarter of a century." And she said, "And I must be grateful for all that I have been blessed with." So I say to you again.
Amen. Amen. And it's just such a privilege. I can remember her and Pippa, absolutely. They were a team, weren't they?
They were loud.
And I've had the privilege of saying to a number of parents, don't worry, don't ever make your young person come to church. Because, and certainly when we were here, because so much goes on outside of the Sunday morning. And if you make your young person come to church, they won't like you for it. But more than that, they won't like God for it. And we mustn't make our children anti-God by giving them rules. They've got to be able to be the prodigal a little bit and find God for themselves. And I'm a great believer in that. And, all I did really is, and I don't mean this in all I do, but I loved those young people. And I can remember thinking, I am so pleased to see them when they come to church. Now, I didn't put any of that on, and I didn't really care whether they, I did care whether they got God, but I wanted them to know they were loved. And so, hugging them and shaking their hand was all I used to do when they came to church on a Sunday, but I knew if they weren't there, and I would text them and say I'd missed them. And it was as simple as that. And God will do the rest. But for someone to show an interest in our teenagers, who isn't parents, we've got to kick against our parents. It's part of the normal journey of life. And at some point, our young people, or our grown-up children, or our adult children, I still believe God is holding them in their hand and will bring them to Him. And it's a painful journey. My brother was very, very hurt by my mum's death. He was 16 years old. It was difficult. But I still believe one day he will be back in the palm of God's hand. Well, he's in the palm of his hand, but he will know that he is. He's desperate. He needs it so much. But it takes a long time for some. And the journey is painful for me. It would be much easier for me if he just did it. And came to church. And that's easy. But actually, God saying, well, that's easy for you. It's not about you, really. It's about his journey. And I'm sure we can relate that, all of us, to people we know love. I mean, and I look around and I see so many daughters and sons that, I've had the privilege to walk alongside. So thank you for that. It was a joy. It was a joy.
I'm interested that you said that when you were in that stage, when you were 16 or 17, and you decided that you'd live without God for a while, that this couple, and now you see that then translated into my life because they sold into you. You took an interest in me. And that was the thing, that you were the only adult in my life that was interested in me.
Because you were quite young, weren't you?
Yeah,
when
well, I was only 11 when we met.
yeah.
But when Ali came up, she genuinely wanted to be with me, and that was felt like amazing.
Yeah.
And it was that drew me down here, and then drew me to God, because and not by ever Ali preaching, only by loving, and that is just such a powerful thing, you know, that and I think that's the core of what you're saying.
It is, absolutely. And that couple, I don't know anything about. I didn't have any contact with that couple after a few years. They sadly, their marriage split, and they went their own ways. So they have no idea about what's happened to me since. But they were pivotal in my conversion story, and therefore it goes on. And one day, praise God, they may know when we're all together in glory, and they get that chance to see what's gone on. But we're probably not supposed to know here. You know, I think we're not supposed to go around with great big heads and, oh, look how many people I got in the kingdom. You know, I just don't think that's how God works, is it? It just deals one to one with people. Well, I think they've got to get people in the kingdom. I don't know if that means. Could you hear me, Marjorie?
I heard you most of the time.
Thank you.
Was there any other questions?
If I could hark back to the prodigal son.
Yeah.
The picture that we all know is of the son kneeling before the father.
That's right.
And the father has his two hands on his shoulders.
A Rembrandt painting.
That I was heard.
Yeah.
I said, look at those two hands. One is a man's hand and one is a woman.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Absolutely. It's the Rembrandt painting. And the story that Henry Newen, who wrote the book that I read, is all about standing, and he stood and looked at this painting, and the book comes out, the hours and hours that he spent just looking at that painting, and that's one of the things he. And they're old, gnarled, you know, quite old, gnarled hands, and I think it speaks to. He said it spoken to him in old age, because again, we sometimes think, what can we do when we're older? But actually, we do that blessing and that praying. And at the end of the day, that's probably what God wants all of us to do, is bless and pray. And we run around doing a lot of other things as well. But actually, there's a real value in slowing down and spending time blessing.
He never lets us go, although we often let him go.
Brilliant, thanks again.
Okay, order.